So I want you to think about essentially these three parameters when we are evaluating any commodity businesses. The first one is asset utilization. Asset utilization is the core earnings lever, right? There is a fixed cost base which you have put up. There is a large investment that you have done. You need to utilize every possible ounce out of it. As the asset utilization improves, there is significant operating leverage sitting on your cost structure, and your EBITDA will keep going higher. So utilization of asset is the first most important lever when you're thinking about growth in the earnings growth. The second is that the nature of business, which I've already explained, is commodity led. So we need to be very careful about what pricing assumptions we take. They are cycle driven. It is not a secular uh, pricing growth usually. There are, while in a long term, you can say that cement prices have gone up 3-4% yearly over a 2 decade period. But in the interim, there are periods of high volatility. And as an analyst, it's very critical to keep track of it because that is where the alpha and the idea generation can happen. And the nature of these prices is not just driven by the demand supply in that particular region, but also by the input costs that essentially contribute to the making of that product, which we'll get into. And finally, I want you to understand, and this I'll deep dive much more detail, is we have to look at a per ton or a per unit number when we look at commodity businesses. We do not look at percentages. What I'm trying to say is that for many businesses, we look at EBITDA margin because the nature of unit is revenues as a rupee. In the case of, let's say, PVR, we are tracking can the EBITDA margin go up from 15 to 20. In the case of many IT businesses, or even in the case of banks, I would say what we're tracking is a net interest margin, right? In FMCG companies, we track what is the gross margin, what is the EBITDA margin. But those are different business models, and I explain why. In businesses which have a high pass-through nature of pricing and less pricing power at the revenue level, we need to look at per unit economics. So these are the three things that we need to understand first when you're looking at this kind of companies. And just to illustrate, the framework which you're discussing today, please don't limit yourself to thinking that this applies only to the cement sector. What we are trying to say is that this nature of modeling actually applies to a whole set of sectors, and you can see it here. Cement, which we'll cover, steel, there also we look at per ton, and the pass through there is iron ore and coking coal, and the selling product is HRC, which is hot rolled coils, right? And we have to take a view on the pricing of HRC. Similar, and the nature of modeling is similar. Similarly, in aluminium also, which is again linked to global prices and the pass-through is alumina. In oil and gas refining, we look at per barrel margins, and crude is a pass-through. In auto ancillaries also, we look at what is the total uh, money that they make per tire or per wheel or per unit sold, because a lot of the cost is when I say pass through, what I'm trying to say is that the vendor or the supplier has a transparent kind of pricing mechanism, and the buyer or the customer allows him to make a particular fixed margin per unit. And if the input prices, let's say steel goes up, then that is allowed to be passed through, and the revenue will see an uptick because the average selling price has gone up. But that is not some great achievement because on a per unit basis, maybe they're making the same or lesser money. Similarly, on paper and sugar. So these sectors cannot be looked at in the same framework as you're looking at the physical footprint model. These are sectors that have a particular large fixed investment made, and on that they have to utilize certain they have to apply a certain utilization rate to arrive at a particular volume which they sell, and on that you have to apply what is the going rate in the market basis industry understanding of realizations, right? And then we look at the cost structure on a unit basis.